What's going on, YouTube? Jeff here, or as most of you know me, the RX7 cluster guy. I've been repairing these FD RX7s for about 5 or 6 years now. I think I did my first one in 2015. Out of necessity, I bought my RX7. The odometer went out, and I had to replace I had to figure out how to repair the speedometer, the tachometer, and the odometer. So I got my start there, and then I did a friend's, and it's kind of just taken off from there. And now I'm doing a lot of upgrades, and a lot of you have seen my Oled odometer upgrade, which has been a pretty wild hit, but it basically takes the factory speedometer board, replaces the odometer unit and housing on the factory board with a new, updated, and more functional, I would say, Oled unit. And that just fits right into the factory location. And it'll do the tachometer, or sorry, not the tachometer, the odometer reading, as well as the speedometer in a digital format, and then you can get it configured for the boost gauge as well. So that's been a pretty big hit. I'm excited today to bring a new product. It is a flat-faced tachometer unit. So when I'm repairing and upgrading these things, I get a lot of questions. Hey, do you upgrade the gauge faces? Basically, there's some companies like Rev Limiter and Black Cat Customs that make nicer, um, LED backlit capable gauge faces where you can change the color of your gauges, and they look really good when installed correctly. They're top notch. They add a lot of aesthetic appeal to the cluster, in my opinion, and a lot of people out there. The one downside, and it's pretty huge, is that it requires destructive modification to install those. So up until now, I've basically said no. Because I do warranties on all my work and it's destructive modification, and I have done these in the past. I've actually had gauge needles break apart while I'm trying to trim the needle up so it doesn't bind. And then you got to super glue the face down in the center to the factory plastic housing. So a lot of that, it's just not really what I would consider reversible modification. And just to show you what I'm talking about, the factory tachometer unit here is dished. It's molded into shape to match the plastic housing here. So you can see it's raised on the perimeter here, and closer, or it's flat in the center, and it's low here and high here. So when you put a flat face across it, there's a few millimeter gap. You can kind of see where it sticks up in the center, and what that causes is an issue with the needle itself in the center binding, so it doesn't sweep correctly. So that's why you got to trim the needle, black housing here all the way around, and then glue the center down so that it just adds a little bit more, gives you a little bit more clearance on the gauge needle so it works correctly. So what I've done is, since I really like those faces, I think they look really good, especially with the OLED unit. I decided to create a flat face tachometer unit that's LED backlit, so that you can change your backlighting, you can change the gauge faces and it's fully reversible. You can take this out and reinstall your factory one at any time, and that kind of is something that I was looking for a long time, and nothing's on the market, so I decided to build one. But here, I'll adjust my camera down, and you can kind of see I have one installed here. I'll take it apart to show you exactly how it does install as well. It's pretty simple. Anybody could do it. I don't have any flat faces, so I have it installed with a factory face. Now, this is a destroyed tack, and the gauge face is marred, so I use this for prototyping and such. But a factory needle, if it's in good condition, you can tell right away. You can move the needle up and it falls down on its own. This one obviously is not doing that, but you can move it up past top dead center there and it falls to the other side on its own. This one obviously is not doing that, but yours will. That's an easy test to whether or not your motor is destroyed. If it is, you definitely need a new tachometer motor. But here, I'll go ahead and turn on the backlighting for this thing so you can see. Even with the factory gauge face, it's extremely well lit. The you can see there, and that's raised on the edge, so a flat face is going to look even better. So I'll go ahead and pop this thing apart, and you can kind of see the steps on installing one of these. It's pretty simple. We're going to take, there's a lot of videos online already with popping these gauge clusters apart. There are three screws that hold this tachometer in place in the back side. They're the mechanical fastener as well as the electrical pass-through to the tach. The signal is buffered from the speedometer board, conditioned, and then sent out back through the connector through these screws to the tach. It's got 12 volts, ground, and signal. So after those are removed, the tach unit just lifts out. Now with the kit, I'm going to supply a socket adapter that goes here, and this is the the nice thing about this socket for the OEM bulb is that that's only used for the OEM tachometer housing. So we're going to pop that out and put in an adapter so that you can plug in the LED unit. The next piece is the spacer for the motor. We're going to step the motor up a bit, so we need a little bit of a spacer. So that piece is required, and that'll be provided with the kit. It's really 3 components, 4 if you include the socket adapter. So taking a deeper look into the tachometer unit itself, we have the, what you want to do is when you're building one of these or assembling one, the first step is going to be to disassemble your factory tachometer. So we're going to rotate the needle down to its hard stop, the motor's hard stop here. And what that is the spindle of the motor doesn't rotate any more clockwise after this point. So what we're going to do is break the seal of the stem of the motor to the stem of the needle to the spindle of the motor. So we're going to rotate it a little bit past clockwise and lift at the same time, like you're unscrewing it kind of, and it'll pop out. If you have a good tach motor, that should work as far as popping the needle off safely, but be very careful because if this happens, the motor spindle comes out, it's completely destroyed the motor. You can push it back in, but there's a spline here that gets stripped out and it just doesn't rotate, and that causes that issue that you saw with this one where the needle itself doesn't fall back down to the correct location. And yeah, I haven't really found a way to fix that. So consider that basically totally destroyed if that happens. So again, be very careful when you're removing your needle. It's definitely possible. I haven't, since I've started using that process of kind of rotating it past the 9,000 RPM point and lifting at the same time, it breaks that seal between the stem of the needle and the spindle of the motor, and it just slides right off. And I've done hundreds of these at this point without issue, repairing the tach and whatnot. So the next step is in disassembly. So the assembly will be the exact reverse of this. Is again, I'm using this flat tach base and I'm holding it together, actually holding this whole unit together with 4 screws that go through some factory holes in the gauge appliques that are also there on the aftermarket units. So we're going to take those screws out so you can see the individual components that go into assembling this. Last one here. All right, set these over to the side. And it'll come with the hardware required to install this. So the face comes off. Then you have the LED backlight unit, and then the tachometer, the flat face with the factory motor assembly attached to it. And there's 2 screws that attach this. And they are the 2 screws that actually came out of the factory tachometer assembly that held the motor in place. So you're just going to reuse these 2 screws. And there you have it. It's disassembled. Assembly is the exact opposite. We're going to attach here. We're going to attach here and the face all at the same time and assemble it into the cluster housing as one unit, of course, using the spacer to step it out. So that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple to convert, and it's a great addition, I feel like. Happy to know your thoughts as well.